Welcome to episode 7 of Never Enough Gaming. I'm Justin, and here with me is Isaac. And
Hey, how you doing?
great, good, ready to talk about this. Been a long time coming.
Yes, absolutely.
And we left off, we beat Revolver Ocelot. He got his hand cut off, and we had a plot-relevant conversation with Anders. And then he had a heart attack.
Yeah.
Apparently. So, 2 down. They're both dead. Now, you end up getting a call from the Colonel, and he says you need the work of Meryl. And he says you can trust her more than he can trust me. You end up asking Naomi about the cyborg ninja, and she says she don't know anything about it. And at this point, you need to head to the armory, and the Colonel calls you, giving you a frequency to use, and it's Natasha Romanenko.
Yeah.
I think that's how you say it. Yeah. And she'll give you advice on doesn't she give you advice on how to deal with like certain obstacles or
Yeah, it's a lot more mechanical deliverance than plot or thematic deliverance.
Yeah.
Because I don't necessarily think she plays a huge part in the game, even after this point. Usually the team is set up pretty well ahead of time.
Yeah, I don't think she appears in any of like the big story moment, like in the Kodak or anything.
I don't remember, but I believe that that's correct.
Yeah, and you get infrared lasers here, and you can use your cigarette smoke to reveal them. So that's a cool little thing. Yeah, and you can get the FAMAS, yeah, the machine gun.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I never use this outside of the combat sections where you have to actually be killing people.
Yeah, the silenced pistol is a gun that works from Metal Gear Solid 1 all the way through the rest of the series. So, obviously the original two Metal Gear games, I'm pretty sure that there was a silencer. I don't remember exactly how it worked, but it was not necessarily like a knockout gun. So really, outside of the bosses, there's seldom time to use that. That being said, Metal Gear Solid is really the bridge between the Metal Gear franchise and the Metal Gear Solid franchise. And, they were trying to kind of develop a bit of a Metroidvania-esque game with the original Metal Gear titles. And so there's a lot of those weapons that are used more as tools than like a game that like an RPG where you'd level up and become more powerful. Especially when you get into like Metal Gear Solid 5, where there's so much diversity in the weapon loadout. I say 5, it really started closer to like Peace Walker, when, you're able to develop your own weapons and everything. But, this is kind of where Metal Gear starts to lose out on some of that. Here's something to make you more powerful, despite the fact that this is a stealth game, and more along the lines of this is a tool to be used as a puzzle.
I'm trying to think who else you need to shoot.
I think that's mostly it. I mean, you want to use grenades against the tank. Psycho Mantis is really the only person you can see moving forward, because Sniper Wolf is kind of hidden, and that's kind of a puzzle in and of itself.
Yeah, and then Liquid and Gray Fox are both melee.
Yeah.
So you can find the mine detector now, which is important for later.
Yeah.
And now you can call Meryl, and I think it's her frequency you have to get off the back of the case, or I think, yeah.
I do not remember which one it was. I want to say no, because I felt like the frequency was a little bit more optional. But thinking about it and thinking about Kojima's route, that actually does sound right, because that is one of those things that he would put something very mandatory in a very obscure spot without hinting too much about it.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Do you think that's a cool idea, or it's like, comes a little too far?
So, no, I'm actually a really big fan of ARGs. I actually worked in some of the ARGs during my time in Transmedia. I really enjoy it because you're no longer just relegated to, and code is binary. It's ones and zeros. You can literally put together infinite bouts of code with infinite amounts of creativity, but there's still some limitations within game design itself. And when you remove those limitations and can access the entire planet to your disposal, then all of a sudden, a lot of those relegations are gone. I think that this is something, and I'm forgetting the name, but there's a card game where you play the card game, and at first it seems reasonable, then it starts to get a little creepy, and then afterwards you end up like on a computer, and then it's like an image. It's like looking through your files and stuff. I forget what the card game is called. It's an indie title, garnished, a really big cult following.
Is it Inscription?
Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
And that one incorporated elements like that. So overall, I think it's a brilliant play. But, I think that there's also a difference. I mean, overall, most of the game for Metal Gear is played in Metal Gear. So to have one thing kind of lingering out there, I think it's a cool idea. And I think it was telegraphed a little bit, but I remember struggling with this a little bit. So I think that the telegraphing is really where you need to be careful, or just do more. And I know that Hideo would enjoy doing more, right? He did that with Psycho Mantis. But like, if you can't figure out Psycho Mantis, the Colonel will give you the instructions for it. The kernel doesn't really give you the instructions because there's no marker in the game for like, hey, it's been this long since they were supposed to do this. Let's give them that hint, or at least not that I remember. So it's not really well telegraphed. And again, Psycho Mantis is something similar to where it's almost too well telegraphed because they straight up tell you what to do. So I think that Hideo Kojima, I think that if he really was allowed to access more and develop more out of game experiences, to where the puzzle was not just inside the game but also outside the game, I think that if he had more freedom to do that, it would be better, because then you'd be able to feel smart figuring it out without it having to be telegraphed to you. So I think that the limited number of them makes it tricky to pull off in a feasible, satisfying way. So I would say it's not well done, or it's not perfectly well done, right? There's the limitations of his time, but I love the idea. I love the concept. And if he, did more with it, or if he tutorialized, like, hey, not everything that you need in the game is in the game. If he like put that in a tutorial, it would have made a huge difference for me having a positive opinion on it.
And when it comes to stuff like that, that's the guy you want to have do it, I think. And
trying to think through my list. There's Hideo Kojima. It's not Derek. The guy who did Inscription. Bungie does a few things. I think that they did stuff with I Love Bees. I think that that's there. So Bungie's not a bad team to have on your tail with that. I'm trying to think of anyone else. I mean, I did some work with it. I'm definitely someone who would enjoy being able to do ARG work and really foster that level of creativity. There's a few people who can pull something like this off. There's a handful of people on the planet who can do it. So it's not just him, but yeah, he's definitely up there in terms of, that level of creativity and being able to pull that together.
And when it comes to like keeping things mainstream and actually making money, I feel like more people would complain about that than not. Like, it's something I would be personally interested in, but I could see that making people mad.
Well, again, the reason why it would frustrate somebody is because it's not tutorialized, right? I mean, Portal itself is like 90% tutorial. That actually bothers me about the game, because I do enjoy, feeling smart, like I'm doing this stuff on my own. Whereas Portal, it's not handholdy by any means, but because of the duration of the tutorial, it definitely is something that frustrates me a teeny tiny bit. Again, not a lot. And I'm in the minority here for good reason.
25% or more of the game.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good the way that it does it. I think it really fits the game and everything. Yeah. But it's definitely one of those things to where, like, you just need to set the bounds of the game, right? You just need to sit back and say, hey, you need to look for all the tools you need to solve this puzzle here or here. There's another indie puzzle game that I saw recently, and it's one of those where it's like an open world puzzle game. And it's not perfect because there's a few things that's like, well, shoot, how do you feel like you need to solve this puzzle? Well, it's impossible unless you solve this puzzle first. So there's a little bit of a trick with that, because it doesn't happen that often, but it happens sometimes. But it is one of those things to where, like, it's just about tutorializing and setting the bounds for the world, right? Zelda, the Breath of the Wild, they tutorialized the game and then they opened up the world. And so if you put aside this tutorial aspect, right? If Snake had come into the base and, Psycho Mantis had suddenly appeared and was controlling you, and then all of a sudden you had to move your controller from port 1 to port 2 at the beginning, and you're like, well, shoot, they know I'm here. And then that leads to the surprise with Miller at the end. I think that would have made a huge difference, because now all of a sudden you have a host of tools at your discretion. You can sit back and move the controller back and forth. You can, know the codex frequencies on the back. You can, do all of these different things because he tutorialized it ahead of time. So it's really just about how you choose to do it, whether that would make people happy or not. Again, I love it as a concept. But I think that it needed to be tutorialized better.
And I don't know, tutorials are a hard thing to do in general, because you don't want people that like have done this shit before they come in and have to tutorialize it for the 100th time, especially if they play these kind of games a lot. That's what I have. I love JRPGs, but man, I know how to do turn-based combat.
Yeah. And, there is a lot of information out there on how to do a tutorial and do a tutorial right.
Well,
I don't want to say there's no excuse for doing a tutorial wrong, but there's enough information out there to where it's like, I think that you can kind of get it figured out as a designer with all the information out there. And not to say it's the easiest thing in the world, because it absolutely is not. But it really comes down to, and this is something that, the education system is problematic with just as much as the game industry is. It's like the game is, in a way, a tutorial. Like, just give people the ability to play the game. And it's hard with RTSs and stuff, but overall, it's one of those things to where if you're so good at doing game design to make a whole game, then maybe if you apply that aspect of what you're doing to other parts, you'd figure out that the one thing you're good at is a tool that you can use in many different areas that you never thought possible. And I think that that's probably the issue, is that limiting that functional fixedness is really a huge issue.
Yeah, but what's good now is games are riddled with, accessibility options, and that's great. So you could always like activate or deactivate a tutorial, and I think that would be an easy way out. I don't know. I haven't played a shit ton of like super new games. I don't know if that's a thing they do, but I know RTSs do.
Yeah. Well, RTSs are big ones that kind of have to do that, because they do kind of throw things at you a lot very quickly. Now, that being said, the campaign, which is normally mediocre at best, is one of those things that that is kind of tutorializing the game. That being said, I think that one of the tricks here is that if you were to tutorialize a game, that, you need to make sure that there is a reward beyond just learning the game for that tutorial. So I was designing a game as a shooter, and one of the things that we put in the tutorial side of things, and it was a game that had a difficulty curve that was designed to make it easier for like brand new gamers to the best first person shooters. It was designed to be very difficult or very easy for whatever type of player. It would like modulate the pacing curve very, very heavily. And, one of the things that we would put in for the tutorial, because it's pretty much impossible to lose the tutorial. And so we had that aspect. But one of the things that we wanted to do was we wanted to add something to go through the tutorial multiple times. And so we added a special dynamic to the tutorial for narrative, to where there are multiple narrative choices. And that made the tutorial rewarding more than one. And we also put rewards in there so that people could go through the tutorial, and then later on, with other things that they had discovered throughout the game, they'd be able to find new things in the tutorial. So we made sure that our tutorial kind of was again, narratively and puzzle based, something that you could do multiple times, not because the mechanics weren't there. And I think that that's a big error that people make in the tutorial, is like they don't recognize everything else that they can do, because the tutorial has to teach the mechanic. It doesn't have to do anything else, which means that you can riddle it with secret and let people come back later to it and find something new.
Yeah, a game that I like that does its tutorial is Gears of War 2. Like at the very beginning, you get to choose. Actually, Gears of War 1 does it as well. You just have an option, like you can either go in the hospital, or you have the option to show the rookie the ropes. And when you do that, you get some actually pretty cool lore stuff on the characters, and some good background and some good conversation. So sometimes it's like, you know what, even if you've done it before, you're like, hey, I kind of do want to see that stuff again. And I think that's a good way to do it too.
Yeah, they did a good job with that. They also did a really good job, trying to, that option for the amount of gore that was put up was an interesting twist, because they're like, we really want to be able to match Halo in terms of, accessibility with people, while still kind of putting out an edgier game that would attract a more unique type of audience. So they had a lot of pretty neat tricks. One of the issues that they had design-wise was with the gun. They were trying to get this reload, which would help people, they would get this ability to get an additional power-up to the gun.
Yeah, the active
if you got the reload. Yeah, exactly.
I love that thing.
So, yeah, and then expert players would hit it every time, and then the game would be too easy.
That's exactly, like I would fly through the campaign because, I could hit it every time, just about, and it really makes a difference, kind of a game-breaking difference at some point.
Well, that was kind of the trick, is that they ended up trying to make the bad guys harder, but then that made the easier people who didn't get that every single time, made them put up against this unstoppable force. So they gave the same ability as that active reload to the last couple bullets of a gun, because they figured that people who are experts, who are hitting that every time, were reloading before they ran out, whereas newbies would end up just firing until they ran out of bullets. So those last few bullets also helped with a lot. So that's kind of how they balance it out.
That's how they do it in Gears?
Yeah. I
didn't know that. Huh.
I don't know if I have all the details correct, but yeah, that is absolutely, at least in the general direction, what they did in order to make sure that balance itself out.
That would make sense because I played a lot of Gears of War, and you seem to always kill the enemy with like a few bullets left or none, or like a lot of the times your last bullet in your gun. So
Magic bullets is what they're
yeah,
called. Yep.
that makes sense. All right. Oh yeah, calling Meryl. You call her, and she asks who you are and then she assumes that you're the legendary Solid Snake, and she said originally she thought you was one of the bad guys, so she takes her mask off.
Yeah.
And Snake says he could tell by her beautiful eyes that she wasn't bad. Like, okay, good job.
Yeah, that's where the very Bond-esque aspects of this come in.
Exactly.
Kojima's a big Bond fan. I think from the Bronson era, I think.
That makes
I'm not
sense.
sure because I don't he's getting up there in age, but I still think that his like GoldenEye, I think, was his movie. And so they had a lot of that, like, and Pierce Bronson was nowhere near as bad as like the original Bond was, but it definitely pulls in a lot of that like secret agent aspect that kind of come along with that, you know, womanizing aspect of that franchise.
Yeah, you can definitely see that.
I think it
Did
was
you?
Pierce Brosnan's, but I don't remember.
That sounds right because out of the ones I remember, I feel like he was like the more flirtier out of them.
Yeah, you know, I think that he put a little bit more effort in than the original Bond did, because I think that his is the second era. Second, maybe it counts
Might
as
be.
third, though I think it only counts as second because those like first two eras are technically canonically like they're not reset. But I honestly do not remember. But I think I think that's the one that he grew up on. Because I think that those came out, Metal Gear came out in 1985. And I think that those movies are late 70s. I think GoldenEye is 81, but I
Was
honestly could just be making this stuff up.
was was Snake like that even in the original like MSX one?
I want to say yes, but I don't remember. There was not a romance interest, and there wasn't really the ability to pull one off because those
Yeah.
were MSX games, which you
Right.
know they had the power of essentially an NES. They did not have the same abilities that the SNES had. And so I think that there was like an attempt to do a love interest, but I don't remember. I think there's only like one or two female interactions the entire game. And for the most part, the dialogue's pretty limited. So I want to say yes. I think that there's one instance in both games that he did that, and there was a handful of females, but there obviously was not to the same degree because they did not have the same tools.
Yeah, yeah. I do actually plan on playing through that sooner than later.
Well,
Quite
you know, you
interested in
mentioned
it.
playing the original Legend of Zelda. I think that if you play, you know, you played through the original Metroid, if you play through the original Legend of Zelda, you'll kind of have a good grasp on the types of games that those are, because they really do kind of thread the needle between those, even though they're a little bit more linear than both of them are. But I think that if you go through the original Legend of Zelda, you'll enjoy those for what they are.
Yeah, I never played the original, but I played Zelda 2. I had it on Game Boy Advance on the class NES thing they put out
Yeah.
line, and I like Zelda 2 a lot, so I'm excited to go back even to that. Played it.
That was a very difficult one to go through, and that it's really weird for
I
me
never
to say
beat
that
it.
because I'm a huge RPG fan. It's difficult to beat. It is honestly difficult to get through because they really try and kind of combine. I think that they failed to do what Pokemon succeeded, which is how do we turn an RPG into a puzzle mechanic, right? And it's not like Pokemon is a puzzle game, though one could argue that with typecasting and everything, the fights kind of are puzzles. But
Right.
overall, you know, I think that dealing with how you could use HMs to kind of get through puzzles, I think that was kind of what Zelda 2 was trying to pull off, but just didn't do as well.
So she says you look exactly like Liquid Snake and asks if you're brothers. Snake says he has no family. Then Meryl reveals that this place isn't for nuclear stuff. It's actually a development site for the Metal Gear. She got captured along with Baker, and she snuck in the card. And Snake asks how, and she says women have more hiding spots than men. Okay.
Yeah.
She says the best way to get the Emmerich is through the cargo door, which was back on the first floor. And she goes and opens it for you. Here she starts to get a little emotionally caught up with, you know, killing people.
Yeah.
And Snake kind of, you know, helps her out with that. And they go more into that kind of stuff later, a lot more.
Yeah.
She says the cargo door is like an airlock, and it has infrared sensors. So if you trip, those gas will be released. And she heads for the nuclear storage building, which Snake is like, no, don't do that. But, you know, she's going to go do it anyway.
Yeah.
In the airlock room, you can use a thermal scope to see the lasers crawl through it. And
Yeah.
whenever you pull these things, and, you know, there's a few times in the game rooms get filled with gas. And yeah, this time I think this is an area where if you trip it, you just kind of have to suffocate and die.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I don't remember, but that sounds right.
yeah, so that's always fun. So you end up in a snowy canyon, and you get a call from a mystery person named Deep Throat, and I knew about this line, of course, before I even played the game.
Yeah.
Because, kind of everywhere, especially in early
Which
YouTube.
I forget which president it was that was the case.
Yeah, yeah.
I do. I wish that I had come prepared. I do not remember which president that was that kind of pulls it from. But yeah, that's a reference to a political line. And going back to what you were talking about earlier with Snake trying to help Meryl through kind of that murder thing. Again, the original Metal Gear titles were not overly politically charged. I think that there was a little bit at the end when you're talking to Big Boss in both cases. However, one of the ordeals is that, especially starting in the second Metal Gear game, Hideo goes really, really heavy on the theme. And so I think that he does try and pull in a lot of political and moral themes. And again, I really think that it was his downfall when it comes to Metal Gear Solid 5. I know that Konami was not a very great company to be with at that time, and I highly doubt that's changed. But overall, again, in terms of the narrative, I very much think that his reliance on theme, and that's a very Eastern narrative structure thing. I mean, when you look at some of the most famous anime projects they've put together, from things like Angel's Egg, which is done by the artist of the things like Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I probably mispronounced that. These are all things that relied so heavily on the theme. Overall, Hideo, I think, falls for this trap, and it is a very common trap for a lot of Eastern writers to fall into, just as, Western writers kind of have the reverse problem. So over here we have Michael Bay, who is so plot-centric and explosion-heavy. Now, in terms of when you dive into the Eastern writing side, and this is very, very prevalent in a lot of famous or even cult-based animes, they kind of suffer from the opposite problem. They dive so far into the theme that they can lose a lot of people along the way. You take some of the most famous ones, Angel's Egg, Neon Genesis Evangelion, which I'm sure I mispronounced. These are all films that help define a generation, and yet are so thematically heavy that they very much lose themselves in the plot. And Hideo kind of does something similar. He very much tries to put in a lot of thematic elements into his work, but especially, and again, Konami really messed up with Metal Gear Solid 5. But I had issues with Metal Gear Solid 5 with just Hideo putting stuff in there. As someone who was very excited to see how plot-wise everything was going to connect, such a heavy reliance on theme very much killed it for me. But it's something that starts a lot stronger in Metal Gear 2.
Yeah, one complaint, I heard someone say a problem, well, some of the least favorite missions in Metal Gear Solid 5 are the one made by Kojima. And I'm not sure why they said that, or maybe it is
I don't know. I don't know what they're talking about per se. A lot of people give George Lucas credit for Star Wars, but the funny thing is that Star Wars Episode 4 was not good until after he really started implementing a lot of narrative structure. People didn't love 6 when it came out. People blame Disney for the state of Star Wars, but 1, 2, and 3 were very much panned, and 3 is given actually quite a bit of praise, but mostly only because it came after 2, and 2 was so bad. Mm-hmm. And George Lucas is given so much credit for Star Wars, and the thing that kind of makes me laugh is that Star Wars is not really anything to give credit for, but George Lucas created ILM and Pixar. And because he created Pixar, George Lucas is indirectly responsible for Apple. I mean, George Lucas is a mastermind akin to like Walt Disney, and he is given credit for the completely wrong thing. And to me, it's so funny because I think that Hideo Kojima kind of falls into something similar. I don't think he's the most technologically advanced designer of our time. I definitely think that Nintendo does a good job really pushing the envelope. In fact, I recently watched the Tetris movie, and it was really cool to kind of see that reveal of the Game Boy and everything else like that.
Yeah, I need to watch that. I saw the trailer for that. It looked pretty good. I forgot about that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean it's not the best movie you're ever going to see, but it was definitely very, very enjoyable. I really enjoyed the whole thing. But you know, in terms of innovation, Hideo Kojima is up there in terms of the innovation. So I don't know if he's, and I know that he's a very big picture type of guy, which is, you know, makes a lot of sense for being thematically into, you know, again into that side of the narrative. But yeah, I mean I don't know what missions he did or didn't design versus setting up the whole thing. I know he's a visionary, but you know, usually visionaries, and I very much relate to this, you know, it's very easy to get lost in the details. It's very easy to get so stuck on the little things, and it's nice to be able to have help with that. So I don't know what comment was there about how, you know, the least favorite missions were the ones that he designed, but I can also see that. I can see him being a visionary and struggling with the details, and him setting up this whole game in the direction that was supposed to go, and then struggling to create the best details to fit in. I very much see something like that in him, the same way that I see that in George Lucas. I mean, I think that that's really where Walt was so good at what he did. Very much outclasses everyone I've mentioned, because Walt was really one of the few people who was able to overcome that hurdle, where he understood the details. Disneyland is one of those things to where every detail to him really mattered, and yet he was still a visionary in that way. And you know, regardless of whatever people agree or disagree with on people personally or politically or whatever, you
Yeah.
know, I think that that's kind of one of the things, is that it's easy for a visionary to struggle with a lot of those not minor details, but to feel very overwhelmed, or to create a system that's very strong, but then to struggle with the best way to put it in order to get people to where they need to go. And there's a lot of psychological reasons as to why that can be. I know that personally I have experience with repression, and that is a big issue for me. I think that Hideo was someone who kind of dealt with something that was similar to that, just as a suppression of creativity, especially for his age. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure what specifically he meant.
Yeah, and like his political themes definitely don't die here at Metal Gear. Death Stranding, your mother's the president. So like
Yeah. I played 5 minutes of that, but I was still disgruntled from Metal Gear Solid 5 that I did not put a lot of time into it. So I know next to nothing about that game. And you know, if
that's
it
like
was
in the
one of those
first hour.
things, yeah, even that I don't even know if I could get through, if I got through that much of the game. Like I know the detail, but that's the other thing, is like usually the games I don't play for whatever reason that are still really big, or that have that lasting power, I'll still get the details of them just
Yeah.
secondhand. But I didn't even for this one, and I know that it's got a big name behind it. I know it had a lot of publicity, but it kind of disappeared into the ether a little bit after its release. Like not fully, but you know, it definitely was not talked about as much as Metal Gear was. It was not talked about as much as
No.
some of these other genre-defining aspects.
I will say one from the time I did spend with it, every character was interesting. I will give it that. Like I wanted to know more about every single person I met. So that was
I
kind of
can see
nice.
that.
A lot of weirdos. Kojima's very
I
good at
can very
weirdos.
clearly see that. Yeah.
So when you get to the snowy area, you're warned. Oh yeah, Deep Throat says he's a fan of yours, and he warns you about the mines here and leave. You use your mine detector here to navigate this, and man, when you get hit by a mine, like when you step on one, it feels brutal. Like it's a nice explosion. I liked it, and you just kind
Yeah.
of lay there blowing up for a minute.
Yeah.
Although I didn't like having to backtrack through this part a few times.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know how prolific the cardboard boxes are, but
didn't
I
try
know that
that
those
yet.
are supposed to help, but it's also not, it does not state that very clearly.
No, yeah, but there's multiple ways to figure out where the mines are. So that's
Yeah.
So a tank pulls up, and a big, tatted up, shirtless guy, Vulcan Raven, comes out. He's saying snakes don't belong in Alaska, and he doesn't say much else here, but then he starts shooting at you. And
Yeah.
he's not in the tank at this point, right?
Yeah.
Because, okay, so this is just a boss between a tank gunner, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I didn't find it too difficult getting the grenades in
No,
there,
they
did
give you a lot of good tools for it.
Yeah, his tank will run you over, though. That got me a few times. More than
Yeah.
anything else. So you just have to throw your grenades into the hole at the top, and yeah, it's not too hard. You only have to do it a few. Well, actually, it takes quite a few grenades, really.
Yeah.
And you end up killing two different gunners, and there were grenades lying around everywhere.
Yeah,
You
they
blow the
do
gunner.
a good job of getting you those tools.
Yeah, they always do a good job with that. Like even with race. So you blow the gunner out of the tank, and you take his key card. and Vulcan tells Liquid that it's as if you were possessed by a demon in battle, and he vows to kill you. And he goes on to taunt Revolver about him losing his hand. So.
Yeah.
Now next up is the nuclear warhead storage. And this is what I noticed, like every time you kill a boss, your life goes up a little bit and you can carry more health items.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty nice way, take in place of like leveling up. I think that's nice.
Yeah, that was actually how the original Metal Gear games were as well.
Yeah, it's like
that's a holdover from
like
them.
beating the boss in Zelda and you get a full heart container.
Yeah.
So you get to this room where you can't use guns, or it's full of like dismantled nuclear warhead.
Yeah.
And also, if you're spotted here, the room fills with gas, that will kill you. And I don't think you can escape out of here after that happens. So you get to a room where there's a few guards. You go to the basement floor, and you have to take an elevator, and you start traveling, between floors. And I got lost way more than I should have in this game. I got lost a lot.
Yeah.
And you get the Nikita launcher here, which is you guide the missiles, you control them.
Yeah. So in the original Metal Gear game, I think they just called it an RC rocket.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you like the way this thing works? Do you ever have a problem controlling the rocket?
So it's a holdover from the first game, and it's a fun puzzle-esque tool. And they tried to do the same here with the vents. They really tried to take that puzzle and turn it into, a 3D. I will say that, I don't think that they did as good of a job with twisting their work of 2D into 3D. And I think that's partially just because, they didn't do as good of a job as, say, Nintendo did. But Nintendo had experience taking their games and moving them from 2D to 2.5D to 3D, whereas Metal Gear very much had to just jump from 2D to 3D. And so, squeezing it through those vents was not fun at all.
Yeah.
But it's still cool that, again, the weapons are still being treated as a puzzle, which very much changes, throughout the course of Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 especially.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, the Arkham games where, you get tools, you use them for combat, you use them for puzzles.
Yeah. And, it's just, they are more of more of a Metroidvania style game, for Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2, and then afterwards, Metal Gear Solid even, and then afterwards that aspect gets held over, but then it's kind of, not utilized as much really until Metal Gear Solid 5, to where you're not just fighting against bosses, you're fighting against, vehicles and stuff along the way.
Yeah, and even with the backtracking, Metroidvania type stuff, those security cards you get one like after every boss or every other boss, just about. So you can always go back, and sometimes it's necessary to go back. Sometimes get some good stuff for an advantage. But yeah, you have to use that to destroy some, the floor is full of electric, or is electric, and the room fills with gas also. So you have to use the launcher to hit some troll thing that gets rid of the power. Yeah. And you find the gas mask here. Very important. Then you come across the hallway that's just full of blood and soldier corpses.
Yes.
And it looks like, like an alien for the horror movie just came in and slashed everyone. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then a soldier crawls around the corner and then he gets impaled. So it's like a nice little horror section. And then he slashes through the door, and then you follow him into a lab. And you see him about to kill a scientist, and this is Otacon. He pisses himself out of fear. Then he asks the scientist where his friend is, and he says, he ends up saying this is something out of his Japanese animes.
Yeah.
So it's, and his character is always like that, right? Even in, I wish I could remember more of 4. It's been so long.
So you really see Otacon in 1 and 4. There he is in 2 a little bit, but because you don't take the reins in, as Snake, he mostly is partnered up with Snake throughout 2 and 4. And so because you're not with Snake, he's not going to be a character that is as present outside of 4. Now, that being said, you do get another Otacon-like character, which I'll try not to spoil for you, in Peace Walker and in 5, which I have a plethora of issues with. But yeah, he's really only in 1 and 4.
Oh, yeah, I thought he was much bigger than that.
I think that Hideo does a decent job. And I think that the games kind of really represent the main character of this quote unquote legendary hero, Solid Snake. But, he's given this legendary title, for big things they did, but most of the people are like, I don't know why he's legendary. There were 2 MSX games that I probably had an NES when these games came out. So, I don't really know who Snake is. And then he's taken out of the second game, and then he's put in the 4th game. But in reality, most people have not played Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2. So, really, and Metal Gear Solid 3 Portable Ops, Peace Walker, and 5 all play as Big Boss. So unless you're playing Acid, which is not even canonical, this legendary heroic figure is only in 2 games. That's it. Like, Big
crazy.
Boss, Naked Snake is the character that I started with. And, you know, it is interesting that, like, yeah, he's there in 4 games, but most people haven't played the first 2.
Yeah, you played the first 2, right?
Yeah, I did. I got into Metal Gear Solid with Portable Ops, and then I took advantage of the PS3 era to play through those initial ones.
Yeah, you're probably the only person I met that's played those.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So the ninja says he came from another world to battle you, and you fight him. It has to use ammo, so it's a fist fight, and you can use your chaff grenades to kind of stun him a little bit.
Yeah.
He has a pretty easy to tell pattern, but he does hit hard, and there's some health items lying around, and ammo if you're using ammo. He ends up turning invisible, and he says, like, stuff like, just like old time, and he remembers your punches and all that.
Yeah.
And whenever you beat him, he'll start having like no. When he's close to the end, he'll start having like electric explosion coming out of him, and this is where you want to shoot. It's like kind of like a robotic seizure, I guess.
Yeah.
He asks if you remember him, and you're like, can't be. You died in Zanzibar. And he starts seizing out again, and he says something about how he needs medicine and that he's losing himself, and he runs off. And you call the colonel, and he tells you this is Gray Fox. They were using him. Yeah, they were using a soldier for gene therapy experiment, and they revived him and fitted him with the exoskeleton. Is that right?
So I don't remember the full story because it's just been a while. However, you know, he was a soldier who betrayed Big Boss in Outer Heaven. And then because of that, you know, he worked with you. And so you were supposed to pull him out. But then in the end, what ended up happening was that you ended up, but then Big Boss, you know, comes out and gets him and rescues all the people who you essentially kind of leave to die when you blow up the original Metal Gear. And so because of that, he ends up siding back over with Big Boss. And then you fight him there and you beat him to a pulp. He nearly dies. And then, I guess the government comes in after you take out Zanzibar land, which is, I apologize, which I think is in the Cape of Africa, like just, you know, south of that upper area, that tip that kind of goes off on the left, you know, that. However, I'm explaining my poor geography skills. But overall, you know, he is taken in by the government, I think, and experimented on. And I think that Liquid gets him out of that area. But he still kind of is in this weird balance between, you know, kind of belonging to Big Boss, who Liquid kind of not really takes on Big Boss's legacy, and Solid Snake, who helped him out in the first game. So and again, this is where the plot just does not click into place, because then Metal Gear Solid 5 was so excited to kind of like do this whole thing at the end where they reveal how Big Boss survives between Metal Gear 1 and 2, but then it ends up like not actually, it ends up creating a whole bunch of plot holes, including with what happened to Gray Fox. And again, this is really where
5 doesn't really talk about. Oh, sorry.
Not at all. Not at all. And it's really just a huge missing aspect to miss. I mean, there's so much in those first two games.
That's not like he's a small part.
Yeah. I mean, no, he's not a small part in the least bit. And they should have brought him in. And, you know, again, Metal Gear, it's like Metal Gear Solid 1 is treated as like a part of the Metal Gear Solid trilogy with 1, 2, and 3. No, Metal Gear Solid 1 is the end of the Metal Gear trilogy. That's it. Right? I mean, if you were to separate these games out, it's Metal Gear 2, and Metal Gear Solid 1. Then you have Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 4, and Metal Gear Solid Rising. And then you have Metal Gear Solid 3, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, and Metal Gear Solid 5. Those are the 3 trilogies of this franchise.
Yeah, before I started playing Metal Gear Solid 1 and like really doing research, I knew about every game, but I had no idea about how they fit story-wise, or that they're all kind of out of order, you know, kind of Star Wars-like.
Yeah, well, you know, and it's way worse than Star Wars is. But, you know, Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 and Metal Gear Solid 1, those are 3 times where Solid Snake, where David is there at the front lines trying to deal with this stuff. And then Metal Gear Solid 4, I say front lines, he's not really a soldier, he's a spy. more than anything else. And then Metal Gear Solid 4, he's obviously the main character, but Metal Gear Solid 4 is designed to like tie up every single loose end. But the game is almost really about Raiden. It's about, you know, what you're dealing with dealing with legacies and stuff, and Raiden is a big part of that. So because he doesn't have a third game, Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 4, and Metal Gear Solid Rising all have Raiden as a main character, and so they kind of pull them together. And then again, 3 portable ops, which I kind of include with Peace Walker because that's where the ideas were born. And then 5, which includes Ground Zeroes and Peace Walker, that is Big Boss's story. That's John's story. You there? Oop.
Hey, you there?
Yep. You there?
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but we're still good. I was saying, yeah, I really want to play Revengeance because I just hear a lot of people talk good about it, and that like it doesn't play like a normal Metal Gear, right? It's like a Devil May Cry type game, like stylish action.
Yeah, you know, it's definitely so it's mostly swordplay. You know, and that's really where it comes in. Devil May Cry is a very good way to kind of see that. But it is also very unique in the way that it plays, right? They really played up that entire, like, your blade can slash through at any angle type of ordeal. They very much play that to its fullest.
Yeah, like you're cutting through buildings
cool
and
game.
shit, aren't you?
What?
Aren't you like cutting through buildings and stuff at one point?
Oh, yeah. No, they dial up the scale. It is an epic game for sure. Weird, but most of them are.
Is it a Kojima game?
Yeah, but like weirder. I mean, the entire thing like ends up in like a final showdown with some senator whose like skin is as hard as metal because of nanomachines. Like as if you're fighting Colossus from X-Men with Wolverine's claws.
Yeah,
like that's essentially
Armstrong,
what the final battle is. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about him.
and his dialogue is like 2 steps above what George Lucas would put out.
That's amazing.
It is an epic game in everything that it does, and its scale and everything. And it is a weird little mess.
Can't wait to get it.
Yeah.
So, Gray Fox runs off, and you get Otacon out of where he's hiding, and he asks what the Metal Gear is used for, and he says it's a defense weapon that shoots nukes down, and you pick him up and start shaking him, saying he's lying, and you tell him what the terrorist plans are, and it turns out he really didn't know about it.
Yeah.
And you learn the Metal Gear is equipped with a Vulcan canner, a Vulcan cannon, a laser, and a railgun. And it also has missiles too, and machine guns, which you find out the boss fight. Then he begins to explain the technology of railguns to you, as you know he does. And then he gets sad and says everything's his fault. And then he tells you about his grandfather, who was part of the Manhattan Project, and his father was born on the day the Hiroshima bombs dropped. I think something like that. And so his family is basically nuclear cursed. It's a lot.
That his father. Okay, that. I think that's right. That does sound about right. And you meet his father in Puerto Rico when you are managing the Peace Walker conflict.
Okay. Yeah. It's so rare for. I think for games like their side games. Well, what Peace Walker, would that be considered a spinoff?
So Peace Walker and Portable Ops were considered spinoffs. Rising is considered a spinoff, but Acid are the only games that I know of that are not canon. Or rather, they might be canon, but they're like missions that don't relate to, we've got to stop this whole thing. In fact, I think that, because I didn't finish them, but I think that the first one, you're playing against like 2 psychic dolls or something like that. And so it definitely has something to do with nuclear, but I think that the Acid titles don't involve a Metal Gear. So at least they're like side missions. They're not like actual part of the, not to say that they're non-canon or that they break canon per se, but they're definitely not a part of the main canon. So then, yeah, Portable Ops and Peace Walker were not originally designed to be canon. However, Peace Walker was so well received that they ended up making a PlayStation 3 port that they included with the full collection.
Yeah.
So that one is canon and is very much the prequel to 5.
Hell yeah. I was going to say something, but then I lost it. You know how it is.
Oh.
I remember what I was going to say. Metal Gear Ghost Babel. You know what that is?
Yeah, so that's a remake. Well, yeah, so that's a remake of Metal Gear Solid 1 for the Game Boy, which is different than Twin Snakes, which is a remake of Metal Gear Solid 1 for the GameCube.
Yeah, I heard Ghost Babel was a pretty good, actually pretty decent game. So
I mean, for a Game Boy game, sure. And Game Boy was obviously a great device when it came to first-party games, or even like the Game Boy Color had the Zelda games, which are first-party games but developed by Capcom, who have a standing legacy with Nintendo and with Zelda. But when you take some of the other games that they had, they're like third-party. Something like Bugs Life, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
compare to its full counterpart with the console.
And then, well, some games do it in a cool way. Like, for example, the first Harry Potter game is a different genre of game on like 3 different systems,
Yes.
which I think is kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
Like one of them's like a turn-based RPG, one of them's just like a platforming game. I don't know. It's really
I enjoyed, because I did grow up with that Game Boy game, and it was one that I enjoyed more than I expected to enjoy. But yeah, especially with the release of the more recent Harry Potter game, it's definitely been one of those things that they have fought and fought and fought to really give that very authentic Hogwarts experience through their entire franchise of how the games have kind of happened.
Yeah, I have Hogwarts Legacy. I just haven't jumped into it yet. Let me get to it.
Yeah, same here.
So, let's see. Yeah, he says his family is nuclear cursed, and he just wanted to do some good in the world. And you tell him to pull himself together and ask where the Metal Gear is, and he tells you it's an underground maintenance base, and we need to find Meryl so we can get over it. He has a camouflage device, kind of like Gray Fox had, so he can sneak around the base, which comes in handy later. And you can contact him with your Kodak anytime really now.
Yeah.
You can call Meryl and you overhear soldiers in the background spotting her, and the audio cuts off. She's in trouble.
Yeah.
And I have in my notes here, Otacon proceeds to talk about Meryl's butt. I don't know exactly what he says, but yeah. I think I remember that.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because we can talk about the more misogynistic aspects of this that again are really pulled from the Bond series more than anything else,
right?
Outside of something like Quiet. But it is one of those things to where there is a relatively interesting bond that those two have over the nature, because there's a lot of things about them that are different, and there's a lot of conversations that they have that they rely on each other and that they teach each other different things in 2 and in 4. But a lot, there is the one commonality that they have. And even in Metal Gear 2, Otacon like chastises Snake for doing some more innuendo-esque thing.
Really?
However, Otacon is just as bad. And I think that there's kind of a fun, invisible bro bonding moment between those two when it comes to that type of content. So, again, not to say that it is something that I personally would encourage in a game that I had, but outside of the more explicit nature that Snake and Otacon both exhibit, it takes on a little bit of a different twist when you kind of get to see those bonding bro moments that they have over that, which I think is really the only positive aspect that you could say that those aspects bring.
1 sec. All right, you there? Sorry about that.
No, it's all good.
All right, so you have your conversation with Otacon, and he gives you a level 4 security card. And you're kind of getting ready for him to have a heart attack like the other ones do. And, he doesn't. But
yeah.
Yeah, he asks him like how he feels and everything, just waiting for it. This is when he tells you to call him Otacon, short for Otaku Convention.
Yeah.
Really leaning into that, which is fun.
Yeah.
He proceeds to tell you how all he wanted to do was make robots, like in the animes, like Gundam and stuff like that. And then he can bring you ammo and rations if you call him, using his camouflage if you call him. Kind of cool.
Yeah.
So now we need to go.
I think that this is the first game where you get the camouflage and the bandana, I think.
When do you get the bandana?
I don't remember when you get it, but those are 2 end game items that you get throughout the series. The bandana is unlimited ammo, and then the active camouflage. And those are 2 end game items that you get throughout the series. Those are like New Game Plus modes almost.
Okay, that'd be fun to play through like that.
Yeah.
So you have to go find Meryl, and it was at this point, like, she's actually walking around with other guards, and I accidentally killed her.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, that happened to me once. I killed her on accident because I was just shooting up a room full of guards. I think I was just shooting people, and I killed her.
Yeah.
But you have to follow her into a bathroom, and then she ends up behind you and puts you at gunpoint. And she's in her underwear, and you start hitting on her right away, as you do.
Yeah.
And y'all have a good conversation about war and heroes, about how there are no heroes in war. And she's like, "Aren't you a hero?" And Snake's like, "No, I'm just good at killing."
I have to say that the real big difference between David and John, because there's a lot of similarities, which like duh, they're clones, right? But
Yeah.
like one of the biggest aspect that is David is a lot more dramatic. Solid Snake is a lot more dramatic than Big Boss is. And it's funny because I'm very similar in that regard. I'm very dramatic in that way. But with that being said, I think that not to say that like David hadn't been through a lot, because he absolutely had, but I think that Big Boss earns some of that drama a little bit more. And then to kind of add to that, I think that it's one of those things to where David kind of spends time wallowing, and Jack, Big Boss, he utilizes his trauma to help other people, right? That's what Outer Heaven is it's trying to walk away from the government that is so likely to stab you in the back. And I think that that's really what made me fall in love as much as I did with the Metal Gear series. And it's really why, Metal Gear Solid 5 was such a huge disappointment, because I think that Kojima was trying to make him kind of the bad guy, but then ended up deciding kind of not to. And, trying to kind of retcon that, which I think is perfectly fine. I would have loved to have seen that too. But similar to the way that they're trying to do with the new Final Fantasy series. But I want to say that's really the biggest difference between, Naked Snake and Solid Snake, is that they're both very dramatic individuals, which I greatly enjoy. But I think that Naked Snake, first and foremost, earns his a little bit more, and then utilizes his to help other people. Whereas Solid Snake is just
he's still fighting with it
a little bit.
He has, he's still definitely fighting with it.
And I wallow and whine in my trauma and my mental issues for sure. Like, there is nothing wrong with that. And I think that there's a lot of people who relate to that, which is why Cloud was such a popular figure. But again, it's why I loved Crisis Core on the PSP so much, is because Zach, had, to me, so much more reason to wallow than Cloud did. And yet everything he did was approached with such joy and grace and courageousness that, it's not the biggest, the best Final Fantasy game story-wise, but is absolutely one of those things to where, like, he is the type of character who I would love to be towards the end of my life.
Yeah, exactly. I love Zack, too.
Yeah, I think it's going to be kind of like an Avatar situation, right? Zuko's the one you relate to. Iroh's the one you want to be.
yeah. Good. He says, Snake goes on to say that he has no purpose and being on the battlefield is what makes him feel alive. And you then flirt for me, so that's not going to stop that being said. She then gives you one of the 3 cards you need, and she gives you kind of her backstory, but I don't know if there was anything really worth noting, because I don't really have any here. I just know she just has some father issues.
Yeah, she's got some issues with Campbell, which kind of makes sense. I mean, first time you see him, he's in a Puerto Rican prison. So, or no, not Puerto Rico. I don't remember. But yeah, so there's definitely some parental issues there. There's a lot of issues with the military and with being what is essentially a military brat. There's a lot of issues there. But at the end, you don't really get a whole lot of stuff, Metal Gear Solid 4 gives them a very Indiana Jones vibe, right? Where Indiana Jones walks into the tavern, Miriam's like, I was a child and I was in love. And it's like, you get those feelings, but you don't really get the backstory to really understand or know anything behind it. So you kind of get that aspect. But, that flirtatious side that you get, he's clearly a very lonely, locked away individual. And I think that he gets this because he was cloned after, all the issues that Big Boss had. And so it's definitely one of those things to where I think he inherits some of that. But he definitely has this element of isolation that he definitely tries to cover up with physical attachment. But he does such a poor job of letting people in, which I think was something that, they were working on a little bit more with Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker and 5. He was one to talk to people more in Peace Walker. And I think that there was some redemption to his difficulties that he had in 3 with that opening up, with all those different codex calls where people were just trying to get him to open up. And I don't think that's something that Solid Snake ever had. And he very much tries to, and it's very much, he does this like his father, where he tries to use physical attachment to replace that, something I very, very much understand. But it is one of those things to where I definitely wish they touched on that just a little bit more, really dived into who he was. But again, we technically only get him for 2 games, so
and we get a good amount of information on him for those 2 games we have. So now it's time to go to the commander's room, and she gives you the level 5 key card. And it's level 5 key card the last one you get, or is it 6? I can't remember, but
Yeah, I don't remember.
she heads off and tells you to follow her, and this is where I picked up the night vision goggles and the diazepam, and you'll be using that later. So you get the commander's office, and Meryl's head, she starts to have like a headache and starts acting weird. She draws her gun on you and starts like talking crazy. She's like, starts saying like, I think she starts telling you like, don't you like love me and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And she's possessed by Psycho Man. And
yes,
you have to use hand to hand because you don't want to kill her. It's kind of like that fight in Resident Evil 5 where you have to take down Jill.
Yeah.
But you can kill her and you can lose if you want.
Yeah. There are a lot of paradoxes when you start moving through Metal Gear Solid 3 onward. That's really where the paradox kills come in, and those are the ones that will shut you down real fast. And they're fun. It's a really fun lose condition to be able to have.
Yeah, because it's somewhat like unexpected. Like, oh shit, I really did. Like when I killed her on accident earlier.
Yeah,
that kind of blew my mind for a minute.
Well, that is a big part of it. But it gets really cool when you dive into 3, because 3 is the first game that's again in the past, and that's where when you kill people who are supposed to be in the later games, like if you kill Otacon, you get hit with this paradox kill, and you can't, that basically to where like, hey, you screwed up the whole timeline. And so they do these little fake out like these death systems, which Nier Automata did a really good job. Like there's a little chip that's like an OS chip inside your main character, where if you remove that, that's one of the ways to die. And so it kind of provides like an alternate ending of.
All right, took a little bit of a break, but we left off talking about Psycho Man.
Yeah.
So we're just starting that fight, so you do have to beat up Meryl and knock her down, knock her out. And you can see him using her as a puppet. He's camouflaged above her. It looks really cool. So eventually, you knock her out, and he rants about how he's the best sidekick and telekinetic out there, and he starts to read your mind. And I think this is definitely probably the most famous thing in Metal Gear Solid.
Yes.
Psycho Mantis' scene. And he'll read your memory. And I didn't have anything else on my memory, so he said my memory is completely clean. And he'll also he'll say things based on the way you've been playing. Like you said, I'm a very methodical man and the kind to kick tires before leaving. I'm a highly skilled warrior and extremely careful at traps. So I don't know all his dialogue, but I assume there's quite a bit there.
Yeah, and it shifts based on a variety of factors. But I think that, and it'll be interesting to see kind of how AI will help with dialogue in the future. Because instead of having to say, hey, these are the different things that they can say under these circumstances, you'll then be able to kind of develop, this is the type of thing that someone like this would say in this scenario. And so I think it'll be interesting to kind of be able to control that type of stuff, how that'll work in the future. But at least for right now, I think that they put quite a bit of time and thought into the specific circumstances that led to specific dialogue here.
Yeah, they definitely put a lot of care in this fight. Well, actually, the fight isn't even a highlight. It's just a dialogue. The fight's nothing special, really. So
it's a lot more platformy than a lot of the other games are. It's one of those to where it's like you kind of have 3 phases, or not specifically 3, but it's like, oh, you have to do something so you can do damage to the boss, and you do a little damage to the boss, and then you can't do it again. And this is kind of the most platformy-esque boss fights in the game. Sniper Wolf can kind of be considered a little bit like that.
There's
but
a couple
it really
different ways
is
you can take her out. Like, I know people use Nakia missiles to take her out. I didn't even think about doing that.
In 5, with one of the sniper bosses, you can actually use the cardboard box to take them out, which is pretty fun.
What, do you just creep up on them and they don't even realize?
No, you drop supplies on top of their head.
Awesome.
You can use cardboard boxes. So in 5, you can use cardboard boxes to drop supplies off, and you can run a supply drop right on top of their head and knock them out cold. So 5 has a lot more of that. And again, this is Hideo's big run. It's like, hey, we're going to make this as fancy as possible. Okay, cool. I made the game I wanted to make. Time to retire. And then new technology comes out, and Hideo's like, what? Like he somehow is like completely immune to the essence of time and technological growth. And so he's like, all right, guys, let's get back to work. And he retires like every time up until Death Stranding. Death Stranding was his big push. So I anticipate he will die at his desk one of these days of old age. But I don't anticipate this man quitting. I mean, he's done it so many times. I do not anticipate this guy being capable of retiring, which I very, very much fully understand.
And he still makes
but
great stuff. Like
yeah,
Death Stranding's still good to. I mean, it's more niche specific people. But I'm not really into that gameplay loop. I will beat it eventually, but like I said, there's something you'll find in it. I thought the characters were fascinating.
he does a good job with a lot of stuff, and you know, it's always exciting to see kind of what he's up to. You know, to a certain extent, almost like an old friend. You know, but like, hey, what's going
Yeah.
on here? And you know, the Gestalt principle of the mind really says that, hey, we are capable of filling in the blanks ourselves, which is very necessary when it comes to Hideo because there's so many blanks. And I think that was my
Right.
disappointment with 5, is that I wanted to know what he was going to do. Like, I can fill in the blanks myself. I can have my own headcanon. And I will say that there are huge advantages to headcanon. It's why I really enjoy, you know,
It's a
developing
big part of the game I'm
games.
playing right now. Majora's Mask is all about headcanon.
Nintendo in and of itself is headcanon. I mean, I don't even think the developers have a narrative team out there who know what they're doing, because I'm pretty sure that the compendium they put out of the timeline was copied from fan work that somebody did. Like, Nintendo has no clue what they're doing in that realm, which is perfectly fine. You know,
You
they're
don't need
doing
it.
other things. Well, you know, so this is an interesting question to pull up, because the short answer is yeah, you do need, in terms of structure itself, and that's really what makes the best narratives, is narrative structure. But they put their narrative structure and they combine it with the aesthetics of gameplay in order to create a narrative that is purely mechanical, that has no text in it. And you don't need the text to tell that particular type of story. Mario itself is still based off of narrative structure, but instead it just utilizes mechanics to derive pacing, right? Kisho Tenketsu, it's not a hero's journey. It's not a 3-act structure. Aristotle's 3-act structure, Freytag's 5-act, you know, the Asian 4-act structure, with Japanese version being Kisho Tenketsu. Those are all pacing structures, and they're all very different. Part of my goal in the creative continuum was, how do I combine the pacing structures and the character structures, the structures that Dan Harmon with the Story Circle and Joseph Campbell with the Hero's Journey put out. And so it's a different type of structure, but that structure is still absolutely essential in the way that the gameplay works itself out. So, you know, and that's just something I nerd out about, is because I find that particularly fascinating. But it is definitely one of those things to where Hideo trying to add in the story, it was one of my big disappointments in 5, because it's like, sure, I can create my own headcanon like Nintendo does, but I wanted to see what was going through his head. I wanted to be able to make that connection, because I think that's a big part of narrative, is that it is a connection with the creator. And people will be like, oh, well, death to the author, right? You know, this entire idea of, you know, the art's now in my hand. But that's not the case. It's about connection and communication, and you're trying to develop that with the author. And if the author leaves too much, which I think in 5 he very much did, again, it's probably on par for the way that he did like Metal Gear Solid 2 and Metal Gear Solid 4. But this was not just one of those games. This was the connector between Metal Gear and Metal Gear Solid 1. And so I think that
Right.
that's kind of like the big thing, where it's like, it was like Mass Effect. The entire thing just flopped out at the end.
Yeah, I haven't seen that Mass Effect ending. I only played 1 and 2, so I can't wait to see Are you in the camp that it's bad?
Three's a lot of fun. What?
You're in the camp that the ending's bad, like not
No,
satisfying.
I'm going to be honest, I didn't really care. It's honestly really hard to make something like that matters. And one of the games I was working on
Right.
beforehand, it was one of those things to where, like, the way that I had it set up was, you have a story through the full game, and that way there's like only 2 or 3 stories that there's only 2 or 3 ways that the main campaign can possibly end, because you're just playing through the campaign. That's it. Like, there's nothing there. But in the campaign, there's a lot of many choices that you can make. So there's like the story choices, there's the character choices, there's the world choices. And so at the end of the game, you know, you get a few choices that you get to make for the game that ends up changing the story. But then at the end of the day, all the micro choices play into how that final mission plays out. And I feel like it's disappointing the way that Mass Effect did it. I think that their thematic elements were kind of misplaced. However, overall, I think that they tried to combine everything that they were doing and didn't know how to do that, instead of trying to focus on, this is the story ending, but then this is where it is. Because when you get to that ending, everything leading up to that is perfect, because you do get those character moments. You do get those world moments. You just don't. It was just a story that collapsed in of on top of it.
I think something that, well, it can be hard to do, especially if endings and choices in general, like, you don't want to present the choice as straight up as a, like, this will determine the ending of your game. You don't want to make it obvious, I don't think. I think a game that does that actually pretty well is Call of Duty Black Ops 2, where, like, there's a mission where there's a guy and you have to snipe him, and your ending, most players are going to snipe him in the head, but you get a whole different ending that changes a whole bunch, even, like, I think even level wise, if you, like, shoot him in the ink. So I just think cool. I think that was that. But
Spec Ops was another game that did a decent job with a lot of those invisible choices, and Mark Brown has a whole episode on that that's absolutely worth watching. But yeah, it is those invisible choices that make the biggest difference. And I think that overall, right, being sly with how you develop things is definitely something that's important. It's one of those things that's like, hey, you want the gameplay to be kind of invisible because you don't want to take someone out of this or take someone out of that. But there are definitely big moments where explicit content is great to have, because it's one of those things that gives you that big wow moment. And implicit stuff, it doesn't always do that right away, which is perfectly fine. But it is, you kind of want to be able to, I don't want to say balance both, but it is absolutely something to where it's like, hey, enjoy the big wow moment as much as you do the little moments that you may not ever see.
Right. And also it depends what kind of person's playing the game too, because that falls with, like, immersion and stuff. Me personally, I don't mind getting taken out of the game. Like, I love, even if I'm playing a serious game, if a dumb, stupid, funny glitch happens, I think that's great. I love little shit like that. So, but some people, that's why they play games, is to be immersed, and I get that. Now let's, I guess, continue on a Psycho Man. So, but in order to hit him, he's, like, throwing chairs at you and everything. He's just throwing furniture at you. It's kind of great. And if you try to shoot at him, he can read what you're going to do, so it's not going to work. So you have to change your controller to the port too, which great. Yeah. I love that. And I wish I could have played this, like, when it came out. I wish I was old enough, because that would have been so cool, discovering that for the first time. I just think that would be mind-bending. That's the point. I mean, I think it worked. So you just shoot away at him, and sometimes he'll turn your screen into a black screen. It will make you think, like, your video's messing up, and it will say Hideo at the top right corner. Brilliant. He will also wake Meryl back up at some point. You just have to knock her out again, and he'll eventually have her grab a gun and go to, blow her brains out. So you just have to go up to her and knock her out. I assume she'll actually do it if you don't, because I didn't fail that.
Well, the game would allow you.
Oh, you cut out a little bit.
Oh, I think the game would allow. If that happens, it won't allow you to, like, continue onward.
Oh, I lost you again.
You there?
Yeah, you there?
Okay, good. Can you?
Oh, yeah. Hey, I think it's disconnect lagging out on me.
How about now? Is it better now?
Say something.
Hey, how about now?
Yep, that's better.
Good. Okay. So yeah, I was just saying, I don't think that they would let you kill Meryl. In terms of, like, if that happened, the game would end.
Yeah, you still there?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, you just have to knock her out, and then you just use your FAMAS to take him out and burst bullet. After that, you beat him, you call the Colonel and tell Meryl is safe, and then Naomi asks why you went out of your way to save Meryl. Snake says it's because he didn't want to see a woman die in front of him. And this is one of the many villain death speeches you get. I think a couple of them go on too long, like Sniper Wolves and Vulcan Ravens, but I think Mantis' scene is just perfect the way it is.
Yeah.
He can read your future, and he sees where you must go. There's a hidden passage behind a bookshelf. And then he starts talking about how he's read the minds of thousands of people, and all people want to do is pass their DNA. So, like, I guess people just want to come. And he talks about diving into his own father's mind, and he saw nothing but hate and disgust for him. So he burnt his village down to bury the past. He says the world is a more interesting place with people like you in it. And he said he never believed in Liquid Snake's quest for conquest. He just wanted to kill people. And then he says that you're worse than the boss, and that compared to you, Liquid's not that bad. And then he talks about how you have a large place in Meryl's heart. He then asks you to put his mask back on so he can be by himself when he dies. And then he opens the way, and he said this is the first time he uses powers to help someone that feels nice. Then he died. Kind of a sweet ending for him.
It's he has very little physical contact with the boss. So it's one of those things to where like it's a little disappointing that is the case, because he attacked the boss at one point in the series, and then that's really kind of the only time you really get to see him. There's another part in the game that's very unclear if he even associates with him, but it is one of those things to where you kind of get, generational trauma and how that impacts people. And there's a BoJack Horseman episode that brings that up. And it's the title of the episode is based on the book of the same name. And I forget what that book is called. It's not the Nazi Doctor. It's the one that the Nazi Doctor is based off of. But it is a very interesting thing. And again, this is kind of where I'm like, I really wish he would have expanded more on this, because I'm almost certain that he's read that book before.
Oh, yeah. BoJack Horseman, such a good show.
It is,
Amazing.
in my opinion, the best written show you were ever going to see. And I don't say
Agreed.
that as a matter of opinion. I say that as a matter of fact, because it's not my favorite show. It's not necessarily my style. But I would say, as a high-ranking writer and narratologist, it is the best written show you will ever find. Not everyone's favorite. It's not my favorite, and that's kind of why I take this very objective approach to saying it is objectively the best. Subjectively, not even in my top, but is objectively absolutely the best.
So Mantis dies, and Snake and Meryl talk a little bit. And Snake says he has no interest in other people's lives, and that's why he's alone. And then she calls us a sad, lonely man. And we move on to the caves. And you have to backtrack through here a couple times, and I got lost every single time. Here are they're husky dogs, and Snake recognizes them because in Alaska, and he did mushing, dog sledding days. And Meryl tells you to follow her, and the wolves don't bother her. Which I'm not gonna lie, I did kill all the wolves.
Oh yeah.
Not the pup though. I left him, to starve, I guess, because I also kill Sniper Wolf. So
yeah. There's no one. Plus, the entire place blows
right.
up at the end
yeah.
anyways,
Right. But it's a friendly little wolf, and it follows Meryl around. And there's some cool stuff that happens in here. Like, I think you have to hit Meryl, and then you get in your cardboard box, to pee on it, and then from now on, they won't bother you if you use it. So that's a cool little touch. You get to the underground passage, and Meryl takes point and walks through a minefield because she learned where the mines were when Mantis entered her mine. Yeah, and you follow her path, and then all of a sudden, you get a POV from a sniper scope. And dude, this scene's fucking brutal. She gets shot like 4 or 5 times by the sniper rifle.
In the stomach, in order to make it to where she can bleed out.
Yeah, Sniper Wolf, she's using her as bait. It's kind of like that Saving Private Ryan scene, Vin Diesel.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, it was actually, I didn't know this happened in the game, so when I came across this, it kind of, took me by surprise. So you hide behind a wall, and you can see, like, Meryl bleeding out, and she tells you to leave her, and, that's not going to happen. She tries to get you to shoot her. So, you call the Colonel, and the Colonel really doesn't seem that concerned, honestly.
Yeah.
And, Sniper Wolf's in the communication tower watching us. If you try to go out, she'll shoot you. So we need to go get a sniper rifle, and that's when we have to backtrack all the way pretty much towards the beginning, where, like, the armory is. And, I know you can use I didn't know this when I played, but afterward, you told me you can use your box to transport the different parts of the place. So that would probably make that a bit easier. But the only place I really was like, I don't want to backtrack through this, was the minefield, back where you fight the tank. So you go grab that sniper rifle and you head back, and there will be some, like, respawn soldiers that you can take out. Nothing really new, though. And when you get there, Meryl will be gone. So hopefully you grab some diazepam. For this fight, you're going to want to use it, because when you don't use it, you really sway that rifle, like, a lot. You pretty much need it. And it's a straight-up sniper battle. And I like this. I like this one and the next one a lot. I think they're really cool. Do you like them?
I'm trying to remember. Honestly, it's been so long. I feel like I didn't enjoy the snipe. So I don't think I was creative enough to enjoy the battle. And so because of that, it was definitely a more high stakes battle. I don't feel like I hated it per se, but I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I did the other one, especially considering the fact that it's like, hey, the when you look at the sniper battles in the game, this is definitely the one that is the least enjoyment, because the other two are open, and you can
I know a lot
really
of people love the end.
The end and Quiet. The end is better than Quiet. The end is funnier than Quiet too, especially if you know how to cheat that one. But overall, it is one of those things to where the environment matters. So like using the rocket, the RC, it is cool to kind of do it that way. But it's because it's not as open. It's not as much fun as the other sniper battles in the series. But it's not bad.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mix-up in game.
Yeah.
But the open field sniper fight's way better. It can be annoying, though, getting shot, because Snake goes flying when you get shot. And it takes a minute to get back up, and you gotta find out where she is again.
Yeah.
But honestly, this game's pretty generous of checkpoint. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So, yeah, when you beat her and you get to the end and 2 soldiers appear behind you and disarm you, which, I can suspend disbelief. Like, Snake should have been able to take those guys out, I feel like, compared to everything else he's done. But I get it, You gotta have him get taken in somehow.
Yeah, there is a capture moment, I think, in every single game. Again, the third one is definitely the most interesting, but this one is one of those to where if you're not prepared for it, your hand will hurt by the end of this.
Yeah, it can be pretty rough, but I play a lot of Mario Party.
Yeah,
it's pretty much a Mario Party minigame.
It is.
So she asks you if you're surprised to see that she's a lady sniper. She's like, she's Russian, right?
Yes.
I think. Yeah, and she's like a badass. She asks if you want to die now or after Meryl, and he says he'll die after he kills her. Badass stuff.
Yeah.
She grabs your face and says you're her special prey. So she's kind of obsessed with you, but she gets obsessed over any target she has.
Yeah.
And then you get knocked out and you're taken to the torture room. And you hear, I think it's Sniper Wolf talking to Liquid, and they're talking about how they can't have any more accidents like the DARPA. And it's kind of cool because it's from Snake's POV, and he's kind of knocked out, but not really, and you can move your head around tied up.
Yeah.
You hear Liquid asking if you know who he is, and he always knew that he would one day meet you, the man who stole his birthright. And after 30 long years, you two find the brother of light and the brother of dark. He gets very Messiah-like. I don't know. He really can preach it, especially at the end.
Everything that has to do with Big Boss is borderline religious. I mean, everything that has to do with it. It doesn't matter if you're talking to Cypher or Eve or Miller. Literally everything has to do with some kind of borderline Messiah complex. And the funny thing is that Big Boss doesn't want that at all. It's what everyone else kind of holds him in this high regard for. And you definitely feel that in his trilogy. But it is one of those things that's everyone has such, and especially for Liquid, because Liquid has a really bad identity complex where he's like, this is my father, this is my legacy, I'm bringing back Outer Heaven. And, he's annoyed. I say annoyed. He's infuriated that Snake, that Solid Snake, that David got to spend more time with their dad and killed him twice than Liquid ever did. But Liquid also had the opportunity to spend time with his father, and he chose to reject it. And then after the fact comes back, kind of like a son who disregards the father and then decides to come back and after the father's dead and claims some sort of, why did you do all of this, blah blah blah, and it's what on earth, you had the opportunity and you walked away from all of
do you learn about how we rejected Big Boss and all that in this game?
Not in this game. You don't learn about it until 5, and it's very complete.
Great.
Like the rest of the game.
Yeah. He says he needs a sample of our DNA so he can correct the genome soldier mutation.
Yeah.
And he needs Big Boss's DNA. So now he raises a table you're on upright, so you're face to face, and he talks about how you two are the surviving sons of Big Boss, and Liquid gets mad because the Americans won't respond to their demand. He's demanding the Americans, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's demanding for the body of Big Boss.
Yeah, and $1 billion.
He doesn't care about any of that. I mean, yeah, he's demanding that so he can basically pay the troops what he's promised them. But the only thing that he cares about is getting his dad's body. That's the entire premise of Metal Gear Solid 4.
He plans to launch in 10 hours, and he leaves. And he tells Ocelot that he's in charge of the torture. Sniper Wolf goes on the tender wolves because she feeds the wolves that you came across in the cave.
Yeah.
So then you hear Ocelot and Liquid discussing how Gray Fox got in, and they think maybe there's a spy. And they're trying to figure out who killed Baker, apparently. And yeah, I got mixed up here at the cutscene. Well, Sniper Wolf approaches you, and she tells you that Meryl is still alive and leaves. And I think she whispers that to you. Sure.
Yeah.
Then Ocelot says, if you want Meryl to survive, you better answer his question. And I passed this, so I know if you fail this, Meryl dies, right? And
I don't think so.
oh, well,
Or let me rephrase that. I don't remember specifically what happens, but I'm pretty sure that at no point is Meryl allowed to die. I think that ends up being a losing condition. So like this game, well, actually no, I say that.
yeah, because
That
at the
might
end,
not be true.
I know
'Cause
if
there's
you fail the torture, you leave with Otacon at the end, and he's driving the truck, and you guys have like a bro moment.
yeah, okay, you're right.
So yeah,
Because I know that he's very careful with paradoxes. Okay, so yeah, you're right. Meryl will die if you do not get access to this part. So you are correct on that. And the thing that I was struggling with is I know he's very careful on paradox choices, but he also didn't have 4 worked out at this point. So
yeah, he's still working things out.
yeah,
I like that Ocelot straight up tells you press the circle button to resist and press select to submit. It's still just funny when that happens. And he just like he shoots electric through you, and you just have to keep mashing circle a lot, like a lot. I could see how people would definitely have a problem with this, trouble doing it. Eventually, he decides that that's enough, and he basically starts telling you how badass Liquid is, pretty much. And then you get dragged away, and you wake up in a cell with a not decomposing DARPA chief. When you regain control, you can hear a soldier sneezing and saying he caught a cold because his clothes got taken, which was, the clothes Meryl took. Gotcha. Yeah. The Colonel calls you, and you tell him to stop playing dumb about the Metal Gear, and he tells you he knew about everything all along, and the President doesn't even know. And the Colonel pretty much says it's for America's sake that it doesn't get out, and we're the only person that can stop.
Yeah.
But it also seems he's still not telling you everything, and he won't tell you why they can't give up Big Boss's body.
Yeah.
All right. So
and Campbell doesn't really even fully understand what's going on. In fact, you don't even get the hints of it until the second game, when you really get to understand what's going on. It is interesting because America really is the first group to create Metal Gear in the series. Now, Russia, through Granite's design, says that Russia was supposed to be the first one, but then they ended up dumping that design and going with a different Metal Gear design, but it's not actually what Metal Gear is. So it's not until Peace Walker that America really is the first group to create Metal Gear, despite the fact that one of the Russian scientists was the one who designed the first Metal Gear.
Okay, and you learn all that in Peace Walker, you said?
Peace Walker, you learn some of it in 3, and then the rest of it in Peace Walker, yeah.
And in here you can see the DARPA's chief body. It's been decomposing for days, but he only died a few hours ago.
Yeah.
The Colonel tells you to forget about the keys, and your priority is just to destroy the Metal Gear, which you end up not forgetting about the keys, and that's what activates it, right?
Yeah.
Could have just listened.
Yeah.
So he says you got to get to the communications tower and save Meryl. You can call Otacon and ask him to save you, and he's on his way. You do get taken for some more torture. It's pretty much the same scene, but Ocelot does tell him a little bit more about his backstory. And he says something about how Liquid has a friend in Russia who will buy the nuclear weapon, and he says he just wants Russia to prevail, so that's what he's all about. Also, an interesting part, you ask Naomi if she can help with the pain. She tells you to put the controller on your arm and it vibrates.
That's right.
That's kind of cool. And then you get into some soap opera level stuff. Snake asks Naomi to talk to him to keep his mind off the pain, and asks if she has a family, which, we learn all about that later. She refuses to talk about it, and then Snake talks about how he has no family, he killed his father in Zanzibar 6 years ago, and Naomi's like, how could you do that? Snake says he wanted it, and some people just need killing. Yeah. And then that's when Snake went to Alaska to be alone for a while. Naomi starts talking a little bit about her family and her dead brother, which, come back later. This is when Snake tells her his only friends are the Colonel, Frank Yeager. Yeah, the Colonel and Frank Yeager. That's it. And they said that him and Frank tried to kill each other because they were professionals on opposite sides. Yeah. But they still had immense respect for each other, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, they say that, but again, David saved Frank's life in the first Metal Gear game. It wasn't until the second that Frank decided to switch back to going with Big Boss for a reason that's relatively unexplained, and that the first game, which again should have done a little bit more in this regard, should have summed up, the solid trilogy, really.
And after this, Otacon comes to your cell, and he gives you a handkerchief, Ketchup and the level 6 key card.
Yeah.
He asks you not to kill Sniper Wolf because, thinks he's a good person and all that. He leaves, and this is where you can either lie under the bed and wait for the guard to check it out, or you can do something cool and pour ketchup on the floor and lay in it, and he thinks you're dead. So that's really cool. I like that. Do they do stuff like this more in the next one? Like little puzzly stuff like this?
Yes and no.
I mean, it's optional.
So what they do a better job with is that in this first game, the cigarette is a tool. I think that they do a better job of giving you all the tools ahead of time and then letting you figure it out instead of giving you the tools one at a time. I think that the cigarette is really the only example of something that no, the cigarette and the bot are both things. So yeah, I would say yes, they do. The ketchup is kind of a relatively unique thing, but it's a little different, especially in 3 when they give you all the tools ahead of time and then you can kind of puzzle things out for yourself. But
so
yeah, I would say that
a lot of equipment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Strange equipment, really. The beginning sets you off with strange equipment moving forward. Nothing is as strange as what you find in Peace Walker, but still.
Hell yeah. I look forward to finding out.
It is, I enjoyed it personally.
So you go back to the torture room and you can get your gear back, and there's a bomb stashed in here. So if you keep this in your inventory, it will kill you. So you just got to dispose of it. That's you do get a warning about it though, which I kind of wish they didn't warn you about it.
Yeah.
At all. Nice.
Nier Automata does a really good job of kind of letting you mess with things that you shouldn't be messing with, and kind of does that. So Nier Automata also does a really good job with that.
I need to get to that game. It's always been on the list. I played the original Nier, but I know they're completely different.
I don't want to say completely different per se, but yeah, kind of. I didn't play the original Nier, just because I was taking a break from Square at the time. And so I ended up trying to come back to it for the remake, and I never finished it. I just did not get through it. But I kind of want to try. I got through some of the endings, just not all of them.
There's like 19, or isn't there a lot of them?
Something ridiculous. Yeah, for sure.
So you can head back to the armory, and you can get the camera and the body armor here. Body armor is what you want. For sure.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the camera did. Remember what it was used for?
I don't remember what it's used for in the first game. I know in the second game, you use it to take pictures of documentation. I don't even know if you get it after the second game officially starts, but I do know that you can use it for things that Otacon comments on.
Okay. More background, more information. Yeah. That's always nice. So you head back to where you fought Sniper Wolf, and you get flashbacks of Meryl getting shot, and you and the Colonel talk, and Snake feels guilty, and your master, who's not really your master, makes him feel better. Actually, everyone kind of makes Snake feel better. Like Naomi jumps in, they're like, "Hey, it's not your fault." But
yeah,
you end up triggering an alarm, and you have to go up a bunch of stairs up the tower, gunning people down. It's not that bad. I couldn't imagine this part without body armor. So yeah, there's a lot. You kill a lot of people. They're coming up from down the stairs and up the stairs at you.
And kind of bottleneck them for the most part, as long as you're paying attention, or at least if you know the pattern. And that makes it a little easier, but yeah.
So you get to the top of the tower, and then a Hind helicopter blows up the tower, and Liquid's in the helicopter taunting you. And you got to use the rope that you picked up on your way up the building, that hopefully you picked up.
Yeah.
Or I assume that if you don't pick it up, you're just dead. And you have to restart.
I don't remember what happened.
Yeah. So there's just little rappelling section. It's like a little mini game kinda. But you're rappelling down the building, avoiding bullets and steam. I didn't try to avoid anything. I just kind of went down.
Yeah.
And at the bottom you find the stinger, which is going to be very important. You get to an area and there's a broken elevator and nowhere to go. And Otacon says he's on his way. And eventually he gets there. And I don't know exactly what triggers it. Maybe just have to wait a while. But I remember waiting quite a while till he got there. This is great. He reveals that he came here to ask you if you've ever been in love before, and if you think love can bloom on the battlefield. And then Snake gets kind of deep about love, and and it's just interesting. It's out of nowhere. I love this stuff. Snake asks Otacon if he can.
Hideo puts out a lot of interesting tidbits that try and give you an alternate side to some of his characters, but it definitely comes out of left field more often than not.
Even so, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Snake asks Otacon if he can get the elevator to work, and he starts working on it. So you head upstairs, and there's a lot of camera turrets, so hopefully a chaff grenade. And you get a boss at the top of the tower. It's the helicopter, and Liquid's in it. And this can be pretty tough.
Yeah.
I died more than a couple times. You just have to hit him with the stinger, and have to wait a minute for it to lock on. But there's not much places to hide, and it takes a little bit to lock on, and it likes to go not under, but out of your view and then pop up and surprise hit you. But it does take a lot of rockets to shoot it down.
It does. It's a longer fight, and I think that you can kind of outrun its gun for the most part.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things where you have to make sure you're facing the right way to get the lock on, and that part is a little complicated. So you have to time it pretty much perfectly to pull it off.
Yeah. So the helicopter crashes and blows up, and then Snake says, "I'll see you in hell, Liquid." That takes care of the cremation.
Yeah.
Great. This little one-liner he pops out with sometimes. Otacon says the elevator started mysteriously working again, and you get in the elevator, and Otacon calls you with some awesome math skills. He's saying, there were 6 stealth suits, now there's 4. What's happening? And then the weight limit starts going off, and you have to fight some camouflage soldiers that come out of nowhere, and I use a C4 for these guys. It'll work great.
Yeah.
So you end up in a snowfield, and then you get shot through a scope, and it's Sniper Wolf. And once again, Otacon asks you not to kill her, but she's all about killing Snake, though. And I like this battle. It's another sniper battle, and it's like the open field, like the first time you fought the tank.
Yeah.
Or not the first time, the only time you fought the tank. But yeah, it's more of a one-on-one sniper battle. She's taking cover behind trees. Luckily, she only takes cover behind trees, so it makes it a little bit easier to pin down where she is.
Yeah.
And if you try to use your Nikita rockets, it does work, but you can shoot them out of the air. So you approach her, she's dying, she's just on the ground bleeding out, and she talks about, her life as a sniper, sorta, and she asks you to finish her off. And she talks about how she was born and raised on the battlefield, and you comfort her and you thank her for sparing Meryl's life and to die the proud wolf she is. And you're about to kill her, then Otacon approaches you. He gets on his knees saying that he loves her, and she pretty much pretends he doesn't exist, doesn't even acknowledge him. She's just like, can you give me my rifle? I want to die with my rifle in my arms. So you do so and you kill her. And, Snake tells Otacon it's time to finish this and tells him to take care of himself and to get a head start out of this place. But Otacon's not going to do that. Then he asks Snake what he's fighting for, and he says if we make it through this, he'll tell him.
Yeah.
So this is when your disc change comes in. This is where the first disc ends, and it's well past the halfway point. Thought that was interesting. So anything interesting? You get ambushed on a elevator again, and the nice tactic is you can flip them right over the railing.
Yeah.
Miller calls, or you call Miller, asking about the ravens that you're hearing, and then he tells you that Naomi's lying about her FBI past, and he thinks that she might be working with the terrorists, trying to get some drama thrown in. Liquid. You step off the elevator, and there's a lot of raven flying around. Another boss fight. The boss fights just keep coming at this point in the game, really.
Yeah, it's one after another. So this one is Vulcan Raven.
Yeah, I like this fight. You're in like a cold, frozen over area, and he's just a big shirtless badass with a minigun.
Yeah. He's brought up a little bit in the second game as well.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
And apparently he can tell, he says the ravens say your ancestors are raised in Mongolia.
Yeah.
And he goes to tell you about how he's good at the ear pull technique. Okay.
Yeah.
And then he just jump into a fight. It's a big arena of cargo containers that you use for cover, but he has a big minigun. He has the eyesight of a damn raven. He can shoot you from pretty far away.
Yeah.
So what you're going to want to use here is the Nikita launcher, and that's probably the best way to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, good fight. I like it. I like Vulcan Raven. I like the way you look, sound. I like his strange connection with the Ravens. I think that's interesting, though.
I don't think that there's a whole lot to the rest of the fights in the game up until you get to the Metal Gear at this point.
Yeah, not really. So you beat him with the Nikita launcher. It's really not that difficult,
No.
and he collapses and he says, just like the boss said, my existence is no longer needed in this world. Like, damn, poor guy. And he says he'll be watching you and gives you a security card and reveals that, I think, this is where he reveals that the DARPA chief was Decoy Octopus.
Yeah, that's right. They kind of threw that one in there.
Yeah. And then he starts getting ate by his raven, and he yells out that you will have no peace. You call the colonel, and Miller tells him that there is a Naomi Hunter, but not the one we know. She went missing in the Middle East. And Miller demands that she's put under arrest and interrogated. And the colonel is still hiding something, but he says give him some time to go take care of that. And you get a lot more turrets here.
Yes.
So just chaff grenade. Now you're in the Metal Gear store, but it's empty. And Otacon's in the middle of trying to get into Baker's computer to figure out the key. And Snake's all serious. He's like, are you a hacker?
Yeah.
That's a great line. He ends up breaking into the computer and saying, okay, this is where the story kind of gets a little crazy. He says the missile shot the nuke shot out of the Metal Gear or shot out of a railgun, so it doesn't fuel, so it's not classified as a missile, so it can bypass treaty. So I
And
don't
I
know
think
how
that
that
it
works.
also like gets away from the system that can track them as well. I think it's a stealth
Yeah,
unit, and
yeah.
that's really where it becomes very unique in its approach.
Yeah, you get to a room and you're eavesdropping on Ocelot and Liquid, and Ocelot asks if he should set the nuke for Russia, but Liquid says no. He wants to drop it on a nuclear test site in China so he can ruin America's reputation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he wants to get Russia and India to buy weapons from. So he also learned that he's also demanding the Fox die vaccine, which does America have that?
Yes, because they're the ones who implanted Fox in the first place.
Okay, and that's why they sent you in to infect Lee.
Yeah.
So it did affect Sniper Wolf and Psycho Mantis, or it didn't, or it just pushed it back. Like,
Yeah.
it didn't get him. Ocelot is apparently in contact with a Russian colonel, and he's trying to get 1,000+ soldiers to hold the island because since Mantis died, the brainwashed Genome soldiers are starting to lose morale. And Liquid's plan is to revive Big Boss's dream, Outer Heaven. What exactly? I know he wants warriors to be respected, and he wants a safe place for them. Is that what it is?
That's what he'll
Kinda?
tell you. He's basically just trying to appease his father and his father's dream, which is, a place where countries don't control that. And so he's trying to basically create a private military company is basically what he's trying to do.
And
Recreate Outer Heaven is really what he's trying to
Otacon calls and explains that the shape changes at different temperatures, so you gotta run around and heat the key up by going, like, on your way up the communications tower, you pass a frozen door. Or no, you just have to, like, sit in the frozen area for a little bit, like, stand there, and then just go back. Same thing with, like, a heated place. So, Miller calls you, Liquid, fills you in on the Fox Die assassination weapon. The Colonel calls also and says he arrested Naomi and found messages she was sending to the Foxhound unit.
Yeah.
And Miller says that we might be infected and we should find the vaccine. And Naomi ends up calling you, saying it's true what the Colonel said. And Snake asks who she is, and she says, I don't even know who I am. I don't know my real name or what my parents would look like. I kind of laughed at this. It just, another very soap opera bit that comes out of left field.
Yeah.
Then she says she was born in Zimbabwe and met her big brother, meets Frank Yeager, who she considers as her big brother. He shared his rations with her and saved her when they were there, and Big Boss brought her and Frank to America.
Yeah.
And she says Snake killed her benefactor and sent her big brother home crippled, and she wants revenge. But I think she had a change of heart.
Something along those lines. And I don't
Yeah.
remember if she was, because I know that Frank Yeager was with people in the first Metal Gear game, but I don't think it was Naomi. And again, it's kind of one of those things to where I don't really know why Frank Yeager changed sides between Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 either.
Right. She says you were infected with Fox Die as part of the operation, and she goes to say some more stuff, but someone stops her and her codec shuts off. The Colonel stopped her, won't let her say any. You go to put the keys in the Metal Gear, and instead of shutting it down, you activate it. And then this is where you get the reveal that Miller's actually Liquid, and they were using you all along. He had Decoy Octopus turn into the DARPA chief, and this is when the Colonel cuts in and says that's not Miller. And then he says the Miller we know was found dead 3 days ago.
Yeah.
And we've been talking to Liquid the whole time. And the room fills with gas, and Otacon ends up letting you out. Liquid shows up and says the Pentagon was using you to spread Fox Die so they can retrieve the Metal Gear themselves, pretty much.
Yeah.
Kill everyone else by infecting him, because it infects anyone he comes in contact with, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't remember it's coded specifically to hunt down specific people, especially Liquid.
Okay.
But I don't remember the specifics of it, especially considering the fact that it's developed further in the fourth game.
Okay. They caught Naomi messing with the Fox Die program, but they don't know exactly what she did. And then Liquid says that Snake got the dominant genes and Liquid got the flawed one, and goes on about a lot of gene stuff. There's a lot of gene talk in this, which I'm not gonna lie, I kind of checked out a little mentally as he was rambling.
I don't know how much they really explain a lot of this going forward. I don't even remember. I think that Metal Gear 2, so Metal Gear, I do not remember which Metal Gear did it. I think it was Metal Gear 2, where it just basically brings up the idea that Solid Snake is the son of Big Boss, but I don't think that they push the clonage until this game, but they definitely don't explain it further until 4. And so they talk about him being a clone, but that's really it. And then they discuss a lot about genes, and basically I want to say that this is kind of like his whole ploy is like nature versus nurture, and how nature can corrupt, and how or how nurturing can corrupt, and how nature kind of gives us that starting point. So there's a lot there that's not as well explained as it could be, but that's really what he's trying to adjust to, is this entire idea of just being inferior to the father, moving forward. But it is one of those things to where it is all about the cloning, and I do not for the life of me remember how in depth they went in there, because I think that they're trying to go for that Star Wars moment with Metal Gear 2, just where they bring up the father. I don't even think they bring up the cloning in Metal Gear 2.
All right, yeah. So he jumps into the Metal Gear, and it's a boss fight. You're in a huge hangar, and the camera is sort of at a different POV than most. It's like at the end of the hangar, and you can kind of have an overview of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But he shoots missiles and machine guns, and you want to always have chaff grenades deployed during this fight. It will stop some attacks. I think it makes him less accurate, and you got to use your stinger to hit certain parts in his armor. Otacon calls you, giving you information about where to hit him, and he said he left a weak spot on it because every character needs a character flaw.
Yeah.
And it will stomp around too. I'm pretty sure if it stomps on you, it might be a one-hit kill.
Yeah.
So it's about to stomp on you, and then Gray Fox jumps in and holds its foot, telling you to get away. And he does some badass flips and blows Metal Gear's arm off. And then he tells Snake that he's a prisoner of death. And Snake says something about Naomi, which Gray Fox revealed he killed her parents. And he tells you to tell her that it was him, and he runs at the Metal Gear, blowing his arm off. Or it blows his arm off. Yeah. And then it impales him against a wall, and like blood's coming out of him, and he blows the Metal Gear's cockpit off before Liquid seemingly kills him. He's still a little bit alive, saying some more stuff, and then he just stomps on him. Well, damn, he's gone.
Yeah.
So now you have a second part of the boss fight where you're pretty much doing the same thing, but now you have to aim for Liquid himself because he's open.
Yes.
And the way you do this, he'll like charge at you and either run between its legs and then pull a shot off. Eventually you blow it up, and you're injured on the ground, and it's in your POV, and there's like fire everywhere, and it looks pretty cool. Liquid approaches you saying that you failed, and Liquid wants to create a new world where warriors are honored like they used to be or should be, and he says that was Big Boss's dream, and he asks why you're really here, and he says it's because we enjoy killing people. Snake is about to say, I think it was self-defense, but then he kind of stops himself. Because, was it? I mean, it was, but, it's complicated. Liquid says he saw the joy in our eyes as we killed his comrades. And he says that they were part of Project, the Terrible Children.
Yes.
And the goal was to make the most powerful super soldiers, and they chose to base them off of Big Boss.
That's right. This is where he talks about.
Yeah. And then Big Boss was wounded in combat, so they made it from his cell instead. And the genome soldiers you've been killing are also made from themselves. So Liquid's like, they're your brothers, but they're like, really? Sort of. I don't know. What's cool is, for this scene, they show like lab stuff happening with the cells, and they use live action here, like actual people. That's kind of cool. He says, this is when he drops the bomb of the soldiers used in the Gulf War were also genome soldiers. Yeah. He goes on a little bit more, but I didn't think anything notable, at least I didn't write down, but I know he does say a lot more. He says, look behind you, and Meryl is tied up next to a bomb. And he says the Pentagon knows about the Metal Gear being destroyed already, and Liquid tells you to call the Colonel. And you do. And the Colonel says the Secretary of Defense sent jets to bomb the place. Nuclear bomb. And he's worried about the Fox die getting out. So, gotta bomb the place. The Colonel says he can delay it for a bit, and then he disappears, and the Secretary of Defense gets on, Jim House, and he says you and Liquid are mistakes from the 70s that need to be erased. So, he's gonna bomb. Liquid reveals that the nuclear device next to Meryl will go off when Meryl dies. So, a lot of nukes happening here. And then you have a shirtless brother-on-brother fight on top of the Metal Gear, and y'all are just beating the shit out of each other, and you kind of gotta...
This is mirrored in number 4 as well.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, that's the big one when you're sitting on top of the Outer Heaven, that submarine that they develop.
Right, yeah. I kind of remember that. The ending's a little blurry for me. Like, I remember Snake all wounded, going through that laser hallway, or going through that long hallway, and slowly making your way. Was that before that, or after?
It is after, because you're pretty weak at that point.
Right, I think that's after your fight with Mantis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys, are fighting, but then keep each other.
Right,
The Like both of you guys do it. And at a certain point it's like, well, Liquid's crazy, but then Solid does it because Liquid does it. And
Yeah.
it's interesting, I guess. But it also is like, at this point, I think that there's nothing more to do except for have this, more personal.
Yeah, and that's what this fight feels like. It's, it's not even complicated or hard. It's just a nice little one-on-one.
Yeah.
He can't knock you off the Metal Gear, though.
Yeah.
Like, he will try to tackle you also. So you knock him off, and he seemingly falls to his death. Then you check on Meryl, and she does, like, a flip on top of you into, like, a hug.
Yeah.
You just got shot 4 times with a sniper rifle and tortured.
Yeah.
But, adrenaline is a thing.
Yes.
I guess. So it's a nice reunion, and she says the only thing keeping her fighting was the thought of seeing you again, which is crazy knowing that, this doesn't really go anywhere because she gets married to Johnny.
Well, that happens at the end of the 4th game, and she is very much trying to get back with you.
Got it.
For like the first half. It's a very quick thing that happens with Johnny at the end of the 4th game.
Well, you end up
she spends
physically out of her age range anyway.
I mean, I don't know how old he is. I don't know how old she is, but especially in the 4th one, it's the increased aging that you have that kind of gives that appearance. He's not walking around at 60. He's still in his 30s, I think, at that point.
I think so. So then the codec interrupts you too, and it's Otacon. Otacon says he'll take care of the security, tells you a way out, and he decides to stay at the base to help you. So you follow Meryl out and get to a parking garage and fight some more enemies here. Then y'all get in a Jeep, and she's driving, and you man a turret, and this is a first-person shooter on rails section, kinda.
Yeah.
I didn't mind this. I thought it was pretty cool, Eventually Liquid catches up to you, and he's on a turret Jeep on his own, and you put a lot of bullets in him. He takes a lot here. So you guys get out of this tunnel that you were driving through, and you wreck, and the Jeep's kind of on top of you and Meryl, and Liquid's about to kill you, and the Fox die gets to him, killing him. And the Colonel calls you saying that the air raid stopped, and he says Jim Houseman, the Secretary of Defense, was acting alone, and he's been arrested. And he says that, you and Meryl died in that Jeep crash, so y'all can go start over, pretty much.
And that, I'm not sure how official or unofficial his death is or how long that lasts, but he does work as a private agent in MGS2, and then he's pulled by Campbell personally in 4. So, unlike the first few games, he is not really, he's official in Metal Gear 1 and 2 and Metal Gear Solid 1, but he's not really that way in 2 or 4. So
you ask Naomi if the Fox die is going to kill you, and she doesn't even give you an answer. She doesn't say yes, no, maybe. She just tells you to live. Just live.
Yeah.
Like, if that was Snake, I'd want to know a little, I think. So you and Meryl find a snowmobile, and Snake says it's time he lives for someone else, and y'all ride into the sunset. Happily ever after. It's beautiful. There is a post-credit scene of Ocelot. I did not see it. I didn't realize it was there till after I was done with the game.
Yeah.
Do you know what happens in it?
So, if I'm correct, and I don't know this for a fact, he basically goes after Liquid's body, because in the second game, he gets Liquid's hand, and it supposedly is controlling him, and so that's why in the 4th game, he's called Liquid Ocelot. However, the 4th game also retcons this, and is like, no, that's stupid. Why would getting someone's hand on your body, do anything? It's like he went through specific hypnotherapy to make himself think that he was Liquid Ocelot, because it was all part of the plan to stop Cypher and all this type of stuff. But I believe it's him going after Liquid's body.
Here, I have the whole thing right here. However, Ocelot makes a call to the president and confirms that he succeeded in his mission to retrieve Metal Gear Rex data, with the exception of Donald Anderson, who he deliberately killed while making it look like an accident. No one suspected his true lead. He also verifies that Stivers set the act within Solid Snake, and I guess depending on
So I actually forgot about this.
the inferior clone.
Yeah.
Then
So I actually forgot about this. He actually has.
he reveals that the president.
He has a cutscene in Metal Gear Solid 3 at the end, and I think maybe even in Peace Walker as well, to where, this is where you get to see that he works as, a double, triple, quadruple agent in, every game. So I had completely forgotten about this, to where he does kind of reveal all this stuff at the end that's, it's the incorrect information. It's kind of like the false news that is what sets off all the events, is that all that stuff was planted. In fact, that's kind of a big thing at the end of Metal Gear Solid 2 as well, when Snake has a conversation at the end of that, is kind of this is how this stuff hides the truth, and this is what happens when you don't have the truth, and what can happen to people when the truth is not there. So that is I completely forgotten about that part. And it continues in Metal Gear Solid 3 as well.
Apparently, every Metal Gear game has a post credits, even the MSX.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
I think that it's 1
Yeah,
and 3
well, we
that's
did it.
Ocelots. I think it's Miller's in Peace Walker and 5, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm excited to play Peace Walker specifically. I want to know more about Miller and all that.
That is one of my favorites.
But yeah, I hear a lot of people say praise for Peace Walker, so forward to it. But yeah, we did it. We talked about Metal Gear Solid.
I mean,
Oh yeah,
a small portion of the overarching thing. But
yeah.
yes.
We talked about like 10% of all of Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, and we'll have to see what Konami does with it, depending on how well 3 is.
Yeah, they just dropped a new trailer for it, didn't they? The remake.
I believe so, but I haven't watched it yet. I think it's in my watch later.
Yeah, I have no reference for the original, but the remake looks really good.
Well, I think we said November is its current release date, but I'm not entirely positive.
Oh, also, that Did You Know Gaming thing you sent me with, what's his name, David Hayter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was some really interesting stuff. I recommend people listen to that. They put out a part 2 with him doing it about Metal Gear Solid 2, fun fact.
Yeah. No, David
this
Hayter
was
hangs out with them a few times, and he's a relatively cool person. He's very chill about a whole lot of stuff.
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for talking to me about this game.
I had fun.
This
is definitely a series that I'm very disgruntled with, but still greatly enjoyed along the process.
I think a lot of people are in that same boat.
Yeah. And a lot of people, disregard Konami for it. But again, it's one of those things for me that I think it really does kind of reflect back on Kojima and the fact that he was not linking everything together, at least on the way that I wanted him to. The way that I thought he should.
Do you think, do you want to see more Metal Gear without Kojima's touch on it?
Yeah, I really would.
Yeah.
I would like to see, and I made this comment earlier to where it's like, I'm not a big believer in death to the artist. I think that it's a communication between the audience and the author, and obviously there's a difference in that communication, but it's not about authorial intent, it's not about headcanon interpretation, it's about a communication. And I really think that that's kind of the core aspect that needs to be taken into account. And so I think that communication is one of those things that Hideo kind of flopped out on a little bit.
Right, and from what I understand, people didn't really tell him no, ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, look what happened with Star Wars. Nobody told George no. Look what happened.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I don't know. I would like to see someone else. And they don't have to be a fan of Metal Gear. I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, this person's not a fan, so how could they know? You know how many fans don't know anything about like a franchise except for like the narrow view which they saw it as?
Right.
So I would like to see
Resident Evil. You know how many people don't know like what's actually happening in Resident Evil? They're just like zombies.
Yeah, well, and it's one of those things to where when you take someone who really understands the underlying nuance of what's going on, that's something that I think gives you the ability to kind of develop things from a new lens. And so I think that if someone was able to go through the Fox die-in and was able to develop Metal Gear in such a way where it was relatively coherent in the way that it approached things, they'd be able to tackle some very strong themes that Hideo left behind. They'd be able to seal up some plot that I don't think that Hideo would do at all. They'd be able to really put it in a really particular way. Now, George Lucas got the ability to do this, and people were very annoyed that George Lucas did this so many times over. So I don't think that Hideo would be like George. I don't think that Hideo would care. I don't think he would go back. I know that he's like, well, this is the game I wanted to make. No, this was the game I wanted to make. But at the same time, I don't think that he would go back and try and retcon everything that he did just in an attempt to seal up the plot. I just don't see that as being a part of who he is, where it is very much a part of who George is. But I do think that taking someone who could really do the best of both, I really think that Metal Gear is one of those games that could lead to a massive transmedia franchise if Konami knew what they were doing, which means that it will not end up being a massive transmedia franchise. So,
right. I wonder if they're going to, like some remake, like to throw in extra cutscene or something to tie up stuff. So I wonder if they're going to do that with the third remake.
I doubt it. I think that if anything, they'd probably do something that says, "Hey, this is what we're planning next." But
does 3's story wrap up pretty well? I mean, not wrap up, but is there too many inconsistencies in that, or is it pretty
No,
well?
no, not at all. You get the mission. Yeah, there's one with the Philosopher's Legacy, and that's the one thing that they really don't tell you about. And then they don't address the Philosopher's Legacy in Peace Walker. It just happens to be in this spot. It happens to be in that spot. And I think it's just one of those things to where they set up this like crowd of enemies, whether it's the philosophers, whether it is the wise men's council, whether it's Cypher, and they set up these like big societal enemies that are doing these dark and shady things. And then like 4 is like, well, these people became these people, and these people became these people, and these people never existed. And it's like, but what happened to the Philosopher's Legacy? And they're like, I don't know. I handed it to this person, and then this person said this person had it, but then turns out I had a fake because this person really had it. We don't know. We don't know. It's like, I'm sorry, you guys lost $10 billion. Says what? Oh,
Amazing.
never mind. That's what Disney did. Commonplace. So, I heard Acolyte was not good.
I haven't watched it yet, but
Me neither, but I want Disney stock to get really, really low. So I'm kind of rooting for them to keep flopping out. But that's a whole other story in a nutshell. I'd like to see some interesting Star Wars content, but I can wait till Disney flops out so hard that they get bought out.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I appreciate the Star Wars content we get. It's all right, but it's better than none, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, I could go on my George Lucas rant forever, for sure. But I think that seeing Disney lose control over things would be good, because then we can see what someone who really knows what they're doing is capable of pulling. But if it ends up staying in Disney's circle, then it doesn't matter, right? They'll still end up kicking someone out of their spot. I mean, that's what happened with James Gunn, and he's now over with DC. And I think that we're going to see DC take their rightful place back at the top of the superhero hierarchy now that he's in charge. Now, I didn't particularly love Suicide Squad 2, but it's still better than anything else that Marvel's produced recently. So
agreed.
We'll have to see how Superman goes, right? My Adventures with Superman is a phenomenal show. So we clearly have a good start point, but we'll have to see what Gunn does.
I mean, I can't say much. I like Ant-Man Quantumania. I know a lot of people didn't, but
that's certainly a conversation to have. And fact is that the second Ant-Man was not superb, but I really enjoyed the second one. I hated the third one for sure. But I actually really enjoyed Captain Marvel 2. And I'd never say it was a good movie, but at the same time, I enjoyed it a lot more than I anticipated enjoying.
Yeah, I need to watch that one. Last Marvel movie I watched, the newest one was Guardians 3, and I enjoyed that. So,
expect the Marvels to be garbage and then enjoy it after.
Yeah.
So yes, Guardians was by far the ideal movie. And I think that really does. As much as I love Captain America, I think that Guardians is officially taking its place as the ideal trilogy.
Yeah, and hell, even the game they put out, Square's game of Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy, was fantastic. I fucking loved it.
Yes.
So. All right, I think this is good to wrap this up. Do you have anything else you want to say about Metal Gear Solid?
I mean, not yet. I'm sure
when we get to the other ones.
I'm sure that there's a rabbit hole to dive down into for sure. But for the most part, I think that this really does wrap up the Metal Gear trilogy. This to me wraps up the Metal Gear trilogy. I know that David is a partial role in 2. And he is the main character of 4, but I do just because of the way that it works, I kind of consider that to be more of the Raiden trilogy, despite the fact that 4 is supposed to be like the farewell to the entire series, which it really still is. I mean, even though 5 is the end, I think that 4 is still that farewell. But overall, I think that this game still plays it relatively straightforward, because it does end even though this is the first 3D game, it ends the 8-bit era. Because even when you look at Metal Gear Solid 1 and Metal Gear Solid 2, which the graphics, by comparison, are really not that different, or at least in terms of the way they set them up, you really do see that the 2 is the first game to try and bring 3D into its full force, whereas 1 is the first 3D game, but it's the first 3D game utilizing the exact same mechanics as the 2D titles. And I think that that's really the difference between Metal Gear and Super Mario and Zelda, is that the 3D environments, like, we're going to make sure we're using the 3D to its full effect. And you don't see that up until Metal Gear Solid 2. Metal Gear Solid 1 is 3D enhancements on the 8-bit formula. And I think that, again, I think the 16-bit era is what gives Nintendo that lift. But I do see this as a mark of the end of the Metal Gear trilogy.
Have you played Twin Snake?
I have not.
I'm very interested in that after playing this.
Yeah, I after my comment, Twin Snakes might switch that, because it is very much like we're remaking the first game after seeing how the second game went over. So that would be interesting.
So forgot. Now it is. So next time that you'll be on the show, looks like it's going to be Zero Mission. Metroid Zero Mission.
Yes, I will have to dive into that. Overall, there's not a lot of story to most Nintendo games, and this includes Metroid. But the Chozo are really maybe not even the Metroids. It's really the Chozo who are the most interesting aspect, and they get a small part in that. So
yeah, all right. This has
been
Never Enough
thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I hope y'all enjoyed.
Well.